Well, it's such a pleasure to be here with both of you, and thinking about Woodman's work now from the first show in 1986 to now, almost 40 years later. A recurrent theme in the reception of the work has been this question, why now? That Julian Bryan Wilson, in her essay, her historiographical essay on Woodman almost a decade ago, uses that as a way to frame Woodman's legacy. And I think it's particularly pertinent given the ways that this show foregrounds Woodman's own interest in the relationship between the now and the now that she thought photography could represent and the timelessness of tradition or the classical. So taking in that perspective, how would you answer the question, why Woodman now?
I think we have to start with the work itself, and at the Woodman Family Foundation, we've been active for about 5 years, and we have in that time received everything that remained upon Francesca Woodman's death in 1981. And we've realized, looking at all of that work, which we've had the great pleasure and privilege to do together, Katarina and I, that there are many unknown works, many works that have never been seen, and that there are also a lot of relationships among and between works that haven't ever really been looked at or considered. Woodman worked serially, she worked thematically, she dealt with allegory and metaphor, and there are a lot of aspects of her work that are sort of exciting new avenues that could be explored. And what we found is that she was extremely purposeful about what she was doing, very intentional, and she was very clear about references that she was making, influences that she had, and it's become a bit of a raison d'etre to give her her voice back and give her some agency. This monumental work from 1980 that had not been seen in 44 years. And we realized that there were threads of connections that went all the way through Woodman's work going back in time. And that seemed to be a very interesting context and set of relationships to show and have the viewing public be able to see and literally lay out a reading that is connected not through biography but through themes and ideas that sort of resonated with Woodman over the entirety of her output.
One thing I'm especially interested in is how her experimentation as a photographer and her techniques in the darkroom shaped how she was imagining what her interventions were in photography as a medium. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about that in relationship to the different moments in her life.
When you look at her negatives or a contact sheet, the straight photograph is rarely what you see ending up on the wall. I think she had a vision for what she wanted to achieve in a particular image, and she knew how to do that, whether in the camera or how to make that happen in the darkroom. Some of the ways she made that happen in camera is, with sort of gentle movement of the body, which rendered the body not in a realistic way, but actually almost sort of smooth it out, make it appear sculptural, make it appear not like the kind of finely recorded detail that photography actually can offer. And in the darkroom, she employed complex dodging and burning. So she really was experimenting with the way that she printed different images to, either pull certain aspects of an image forward or bring other parts into the background. And then she also radically experimented with other medium besides just straight gelatin silver prints. She worked with the book format in which she printed on transparencies that then had this relationship to the found book object itself and the material that was already contained within a book. And that, I think, also led directly to her experiments with really increasing in scale and technique to lead to something like the temple or the diazotype.
I think one of the things that I found fascinating really getting to know Woodman's work is the way that her childhood in Rome, and she had parents who were artists, really sort of meant that she was raised in the art historical canon. She was raised in the landscape of classical art, all the way from the Acropolis or Rome, but also the European tradition, European neoclassicism. She talks about her engagement with the classical painting nude. and this fascination that she had with the subject of art. And so to me, I think particularly when she's turning to the temple in 1980, she specifically says in a letter to Romana Loda that she's coming at it as the subject of art, which helps us see the nudes less as self-portraiture and more as an experiment that began very early on. She took up the kind of icon of the temple as a site as she scaled up her ambitions in New York. It's clear during this period that she's thinking about shifting technique away from the silver prints to the diazotype, which allowed her to scale up radically. And these caryatids all of a sudden are, dwarfing the smaller prints that she did before. And she's very explicit, I think, about how she saw this embrace of the monumental as part of her transformation at this moment.
And as you say, Brooke, it's what she was entrenched in and what she knew so well, but it does seem like she was doing it in this very disruptive way. But I think there's such an interesting rebelliousness about sort of attacking the high-low that way. She's sort of dealing with this bastion of Western culture, but she's using grimy New York City bathrooms of her friends who lived in horrible buildings because no one had any money. And it's her friends that are posing as these sculptures that are holding this thing up. The idea that she was shifting scale in this late part of her life, it turned out, is also significant, we think, and both related to coming out of the Jealous and Silver prints, but also sort of forging into a new territory where it feels to us there's a lot of confidence in that.
And she continued to make prints, so she's working with both techniques simultaneously. And I think one thing that's maybe interesting to think about is that as she experimented, she became more attuned to the affordances of different techniques to realize a certain kind of intervention. I mean, the work she's doing at McDowell, she's going back, she's doing silver prints, she's doing collages. I really love this idea of taking this image that's been reproduced as iconic and restoring it to this collage, which makes us think about how Woodman herself thought about singular images as always part of a collection and thinking about the broader context, but also I think helping us to imagine Woodman not as a single figure who has to be read a particular way through a particular image, but as an artist who is always being put into new contexts and relations as we gain new perspectives on her archive and her work.